Welcome back to another episode of AI Proem's podcast. This is your host, Grace Xiao. Joining me today is Ziwei Chen, product marketing lead at Alibaba.com, where she focuses on go-to-market for their flagship agentic platform, Accio Work. Before Alibaba, she spent years in developer marketing for software development tools, so she's now served users on both ends of the AI wave. First, developers building AI products, and now the everyday business adopting them. Excited to have her share with us her insights on the future of Accio and the future of agentic commerce. Hi, Ziwei. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Grace. So good to see you.
I'm excited to talk about Accio. So I just came back from Hangzhou like a month ago, and I met with some of your colleagues on the ground. Was very impressed by the product, and that was just really, really intuitive. So let's get started. Tell us a bit about yourself and your role at Accio and what Accio is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Ziwei Chen. I work at Alibaba.com as the product marketing lead for Accio Work. Prior to Alibaba.com, I actually spent a few years in the world of developer marketing, where I was kind of driving go-to-market plans for software tools that are meant for developers who are building AI products. So now it's kind of completing the whole picture for me to now move on to the other side about actually growing the products built by those developers to the end users. So that's kind of my AI journey coming from the development side now to the end user side, driving the growth for Accio Work among our small and medium-sized businesses around the world.
And tell us, what does Accio do actually? So I think a lot of people are not familiar with it and just how it fits into the whole bigger, I guess, Alibaba ecosystem as well.
Yes, absolutely. So maybe I'll take a quick pause and take a step back just to talk about the overall broader picture. So Alibaba grew as a large enterprise. We were founded in 1999, and our kind of main North Star was to make it easy to do business everywhere. So that has always been kind of our focuses of focusing on B2B and focusing on small and medium-sized businesses who typically don't have that resources that large enterprises have. So throughout the years since 1999, we have been really just focusing on what can we do, either as new products, new services, to make it easier for them to start a business, to launch a business, and to grow a business, maybe sometimes to exit a business. So along that line, Alibaba.com is kind of the bread and butter where we first started focusing on B2B sourcing. So actually, I will kind of almost break down our development or our growth journey into 3 eras and then show you where Accio fit. I will call it the digitalization era, the AI co-pilot era, and then the agentic team era. So the first digitalization is when we were first founded with that platform of Alibaba.com, where on this digital platform, we are connecting the sellers, or what we call the suppliers, the factories, with the buyers, our buyers, maybe sellers on the other side, into one platform. So now they're not limited by time zone, they're not limited by the location. And then in that process, what we have learned over the years is that things can get overwhelming. There are just so many suppliers, so many products, right? So then when all of these foundational AI capabilities came about, we were like, okay, this is the moment. This is the moment where we can introduce AI capabilities to make it easier for our buyers to find the right products and the right suppliers. So the name Accio actually stood from Latin, which means summon. So the idea is we help you summon the right products, summon the right suppliers, summon the right information. So that's when we first launched Accio as a sourcing engine back in November of 2024. And that went really well because a lot of our users now, even without any experience in sourcing, without any experience in physical products, can find it really quickly with confidence. But then what we have learned over time is that first, sourcing is only one small part of a larger business journey, right? For a lot of our users in the US, Europe, and around the world. So now we're thinking, okay, what else can we do to expand on that? So that led to kind of like the last phase for Accio Work. So when I compare Accio Work with Accio, a few things that stood out. The first is the focus from sourcing only to sourcing plus. The other thing is about the agentic part. So earlier when I talked about the 3 phases of digitization as a platform, right, the website, and then the second era is called the AI co-pilot. So that means is that you are still on the driver's seat. AI is on the passenger seat. It's giving you advice. It's doing some little stuff for you, but you are still making all the decisions. You're still wearing all the hats. And that's what Accio did back then. For example, it can find suppliers, can recommend messages for you, but that's kind of it. So now we're moving into what we call the agentic team era, where Accio Work can get things done for you and get more type of things done to you. So that's kind of where we are really excited moving into this phase, where truly kind of it's like the spirit of the agentic commerce world, where you're not only using AI as a passenger seat, but you're actually arranging a team of agents to get things done and maybe let the teams work among themselves, what we call A to A. So that's kind of the overall context of where we have been, starting from Alibaba.com to Accio, the sourcing engine, and now to Accio Work as the agentic business team.
That's a very comprehensive overview. I appreciate that. So just to help listeners understand, 1688 and Alibaba.com are the sourcing kind of platform within Alibaba. And then obviously everyone knows Alibaba for the Taobao and commerce side of things, but that's actually a merchant facing product versus Taobao and Tmall that are consumer facing. With that kind of context, okay, so if I had to ask you to describe it in a very short sentence or like say 2 sentences, how would you actually describe the product today? Just like, who is it for? What does it do?
Absolutely. I think I would start with 3 words that summarize what it is we will call it the agentic business team. And I'll break it down each but one of them that eventually lead to the who and the how. So the agentic part means these are agents that get things done for you. It doesn't just give you the recommendations, but it can write emails for you, send messages for you, publish things for you, right? And then the second part is business, right? So we are dedicated to the world of business, specifically e-commerce as a really strong emphasis on all aspects of business, starting from the product development side to the growth side to the operations, everything. And then team part kind of aligning up to that as well is that you can build multiple agents to work among each other. So from a format perspective, we have a desktop app that you can download, also a web app as well. You can access the same thing on your mobile devices, on your web as well. So all these things are connected, where you are creating agents on this platform, telling the agents what to do, and then you can go to sleep, you can go to work, you can go to your events, right? All of these things, go to your shop, right? Do all of these things while the agents are in the background running all these tasks assigned by you.
So exactly to your point, like you can do a lot of things, and that's what I found the most fascinating thing. So, we know a lot of products on the market these days that can do a lot of the, I guess, step 3, step 4 in selling. So what I mean by that is they can help you manage this SEO, the content management, the marketing, and then plugging into MailChimp and sending out your emails. But your edge really isn't just the agentic AI part. What I thought is really your supply chain network, right? So across the entire workflow right now, like walk us through like the different steps. Because I remember there was like a slide your colleague showed me. It was like there's 4 different phases of commerce, building a business. You guys can go across it. And how much of it is actually truly agentically run right now? And how much of it is still, I guess, needing direction from a human to really verify and process in the
Yeah. I'll break it down to 2 parts. I'll talk a little bit about an overall flow first. I think it can kind of follow a typical business like life cycle where you're starting from the strategy and the planning part. Let's say what product, what's the portfolio, what's your branding, right? What's your competitor, what's your positioning or pricing, all of that. And then into the actual product development and sourcing part of that. And then you're going into your store management, especially your e-commerce and different marketplaces. And then eventually the last one will be for marketing and growth. It can be for your B2C side, your traffic, right? Your conversion. Also, some of our users are not only doing B2C, but also B2B to wholesale. So how do you deal with that B2B, like management or relationship, all of that? And then, so that's across the different core stages of launching and running a business. And then Accio Work supports all of that, but not individually, but it connects to that all together. So that entire ecosystem play, right? It's really where it stands out, where we call it the sourcing plus. So it's not just about SEO, right? It's not just about how to improve, let's say, the images on your store, but how do you do that starting from the moment you have an idea, bring it to life, bring it to your store, and then drive it to more to users, and then maybe iterate over time all the way back to what other products you can do or how can you make your current product better. And along this way, I think when it comes to what are the areas that are truly agentic, or kind of where does that relationship between human and agent do, I think that there are a few ways to go about it. So I think, for example, all of the critical decisions or areas still remains a human to approve. For example, you can develop or create an order. The agent can create an order on behalf of you. So you can just click and then go into the checkout page, but it will not check out for you. So you have to go in and confirm that. Or from a security perspective, that's one example. The other example is about your own vision as a founder or as a brand owner. So let's say it's the positioning of your brand. Some of them can be subjective. maybe it's your personal story, your personal style of the brand. It can also be kind of that more objective or critical thinking that after learning about different perspectives, this is where we decide to do. I think running a business it is a lot about the science part, but it's also the personal, the entrepreneurship, right? So a lot of these kind of personal decisions still plays a role. So for example, maybe the agent can develop all different type of images and videos on behalf of you, but how do you determine what's good? It can be through A/B testing, right? But it can also just be, this is kind of the aesthetic you are going for, that you think matters the most to your audience. So that's the second example. I think the last one, taking another pause, I know that when we talk about human, it's not just about the users, it can also be about the developers, right? It can be the people in the Accio Work team. And then so where we are seeing is that we will love for Accio Work, we're specifically targeting small and medium-sized business operators who are not the strongest in AI tools. They're not developers by training, right? That's not where they want to dedicate their time to. So what our product team and engineering team and algorithm team has been really focusing on is what are the things that we can do it for you. So take the burden off of you. For example, in this broader ecosystem of everything that Accio Work can do, it does require a lot of connections to different channels and platforms, right? It can be about marketplaces, can be different tools. I think that ecosystem is where it really plays a really great job. But then who is creating those connection points? You know, you can have your account, but then from our perspective, where our team spend a lot of our time is to build those connections so you can do a one-click activation to connect Accio Work to your email, to your CRM, to your Shopify store. So that is one of the strategic areas where we decided to take more of a burden onto ourselves. So our audience can just click and then log in and then start to connect the dots for themselves.
Very cool. I want to double click on the partnership and like how you guys built the plugins definitely a bit later. I do want to ask about the use cases because so hear my rant. So when I went to visit you guys, there was like it was really interesting. So on one hand, it was very obvious on how SMEs would use this. Like you said, like, you know, if you already have a very strong intent on what you want to purchase, what you want to sell. So then that whole process is very clear. But one example, one of your colleagues showed me was so fascinating. Basically, like they were running an event. Someone was running an event using Accio. They went on the Accio like webpage and then basically uploaded a picture of like the banner, the physical banner like size of like an outdoor space and said, I don't know how large this space is actually. I don't know what looks the best with this background, but I need a banner to run this event. And then Accio became like a thought partner. And it was really interesting because it was not like just a general like AI like thought partner. It was actually someone that had a lot of know-how and industry know-how from creating these things, from manufacturing. So they will literally say, it seems like blah, blah, blah. The weather is like this and that. You might need this material because that kind of texture is more durable in the sun or durable in rain. And I just thought that was so fascinating. And I just want to hear from you what use cases are most common. And then beyond that, what are some like, I guess, not so mainstream use cases that you've seen that are quite fun and interesting?
Yeah, for sure. I think when it comes to use cases, you know, we can slice the pie in a lot of different ways. One way is about the specific type of like actions for a business owner to do, but I'll take it a different approach to talk about. I think just in general, when it comes to agentic tools in general, I think there are two types of use cases where AI comes into play. The first is like do it for me, and then the other is tell me what to do. So the do it for me part is that I know exactly what to do. I know the specific steps. Either I'm just busy or I'm just one person. There's not enough hands. So this is where AI does a really great job as a follower, but it can really scale for you, right? It can be, for example, when it comes to assessing different suppliers. If I'm just one person, I can only assess so many, but now the tools can do it for you. So what we are seeing in similar cases, it can be using Accio to find, evaluate, vet, and compare suppliers or products. It can be creating and updating listings, especially for those sellers with categories that have multiple SKUs, multiple kind of products, where I want to make an update to all of my marketplaces, all different colors, all different sizes, right? It's really taking that repetitive work off their shoulder, but making sure things are consistent across different channels. It can be creating content, right? On either social media, it can be about blogs, all of that. That's one area. The other area that kind of really aligns well with what you are saying is that tell me more. Like, I don't know what I don't know. Sometimes I don't even know what's the right question to ask, or maybe I do know the right question, but maybe the LM itself did not have that training to start with. And this is where we are seeing a really strong aha moment from our users. And when I say users, it's not only just people who are new to e-commerce or new to physical like products. That's definitely the area where we have seen the most appreciation, but it can also be for even successful sellers or operators entering into a new category. And it happens a lot, right? Maybe extending your product line. Maybe you successfully exit one brand, entering a new one. They truly understand the cost or the costly mistakes and how important that could be. So in both cases, what we are seeing is open-ended questions on this is kind of what I'm thinking, this is what I need, or just this is my store, tell me what's wrong, tell me what's missing. And then learning from Accio Work based on what we have seen in the space about key areas, key specs, key steps, or things to flag. And also, I'll tell you what's wrong, or I'll tell you what you should pay attention to, and then let me fix that for you. And I'll show you a few examples. The first example about banner for sure makes a lot of sense. We had a similar case, but with a different flavor to that. We had almost like a product consultant. So he would take on new projects all the time. Very common, even as someone who's experienced in the field, to enter into new categories. And he was helping a client with the bronze plaques outside the building, where, there's a building name or the history and all of that. And then so it was a retro case where he's already spent the time and the cost to pay for a designer to kind of like put his client's need into this kind of like sizing and whatever. So he took the time, spent the money, sent it to the factory, and then realized that actually the font size did not work for readability purposes. So when he actually replicated that need into Accio Work, one of the first things that Accio Work told him is that depending on the technique for the font, is it going in or out from that plaque? Here's a recommended size or the height of each of these tags to make sure that you are following the best practices. And then he was like, wow, I wish I had that when he was working on that project. So he can save not only the cost because he had to redo the thing, repay the designer to fix it, but also lost weeks in between. So there's lots of examples around that. They're small, but they can be costly, right? Especially if you're busy, it's your own money, you're bootstrapped into your business. So that's one example. The other one, it can be, we recently had a user who has a Shopify store and was just trying to see like what can I do? What can I do with Accio Work? So he's not someone who knows exactly this is a tool I'm going to use for X, Y, and Z. He just pasted his Shopify link to Accio Work and tell me what's the low hanging fruit. And Accio Work actually dig out a bunch of like very specific areas for improvement, especially when it comes to SEOs and GEOs. For example, for all of his images on his store, he was lacking the image alt tag, which is a really important thing for SEO purposes. There were thousands of images. And he was like, he knew that was kind of important, but he never really paid attention. But Accio Work was like, if with this, now you can improve your ranking. And then in about a few hours, Accio Work did all of these tagging for him in the back end on Shopify. And then the other thing was that his product was baby beddings or baby clothes. There's a size guide. But then what Accio Work called out is that his size guide is just an image. It does not have structured data. So LLMs cannot read it, which means that he's not getting any traffic when new parents are searching about sizing for their babies, right? For baby clothes. So then he actually told me that he started this task right before a drive, and it was an hour drive on the road. And then Accio Work basically using that and 1 hour recreated his size guide to make sure there's structured data behind it. And then so far he's already seeing like new traffic from like LLMs or like AI, like what we call now the AEOs, right? For the first time. So these are all really great examples of what I call like teach me what to do or teach me kind of what I'm missing out on, where we are seeing lots of like aha moments from our users as well.
That's incredible. I think I'm like absolutely in shock because I think a couple of years ago during COVID, I was like playing around with the idea of drop shipping things. I wanted to build this like pet shop store, but just like not having that kind of guidance is actually really, really daunting to start something new when you're not in this space. And if you just had that kind of thought partner, that would be incredibly helpful. Actually, I want to ask you about the partnership thing you mentioned earlier. It did kind of touch on, there's these plugins that are built in Accio will help the vendors actually distribute across different distribution channels. So walk us through that. Does that not kind of eat your own pie, or is that not like, you guys are not in the same category? You don't see that? Like, how does that relationship work?
Yeah. A few thoughts here. I think first thing first, just putting down our Alibaba.com hat and just think from the user's perspective. I think one of the biggest learnings that we have had by looking at our e-commerce sellers in this space is fragmentation. It's truly, and when I say fragmentation, it's not just about multi-marketplace, because some people have like a Shopify store, Etsy store. That's one type, but also think about you have your storefront, you have your B2B sourcing side, you're speaking with manufacturers in different messaging channels, and then maybe you have your own like CRM system, you have your own, let's say, analytics system, right? And then each of these might have its own very professional SaaS solutions already, or maybe they're hiring a consultant for that. So I think a lot of their time is really spread thin by just connecting these dots. So I do think that even from a North Star perspective, connecting the dot, putting them into an ecosystem is ultimately what's going to drive benefits or impact to our users, which is what we want, right? So I think that has always been, we feel confident in that direction. And on the other hand, I think just like how there are so many different startups or even established companies focus on each one of these, just like how Alibaba.com, our bread and butter, started from sourcing. So I think, yes, we can choose to do everything on our own, or which is going to spread thin out, right? Or we can choose to collaborate with them as well. Especially a lot of times, maybe our users are already so familiar with an existing tool. So making them give up and then transfer is one option, or maybe in the transitioning phase, right? Or maybe just as a collaboration to say, bring your tools into Accio Work with just one click and then you're logged in. And now you can connect all the dots together. We are definitely seeing that. For example, we have a user who has their own kind of like email, like solution system where he was struggling partially because of setting up campaigns can take a lot of time, but also, he's using Accio Work for research, for messaging, and now he has to translate all of these learnings, right, into a different tool. So he just integrated that into Accio Work. I use Accio Work as a central hub of say, I have a new product now, establish a new email campaign, establish a new SMS campaign. And then this is my key message. You go to those sites on behalf of me. So I think that consistency of I have a decision, I want to apply it across different platforms is what's going to bring the benefit to our users while without making them transfer or give them everything in their ecosystem that they have built out over time. And I think in that process, what we are also benefiting or learning through those partnerships with those channels are also just like learning opportunities on what's the future of AI when it comes to different kind of areas. I think a lot of those traditional SaaS solutions are also experimenting. So I think that also creates a really win-win like experimentational type of like collaboration of let's see what kind of new agentic behavior that maybe Accio Work introduced through our plugin to the new platforms, and now they are learning what else they can improve or enhance or integrate into their own ecosystem as well. But ultimately, because our sellers or users are using those tools back and forth, it's a shared type of traffic and that has that synergy in general.
Very fascinating. So it's really the user experience first, but like Alibaba second in that sense. So let's talk about Alibaba then. So it's no secret Accio sits on top of like Alibaba supply network. Guys have transaction history, sourcing know-how, all the data in the world from e-commerce over the last 2-3 decades. How do we understand that? Like, is that like huge edge for you guys? Do you think you guys have leveraged Alibaba's ecosystem to build your things out? How do you see that relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general, I would say that having our own supply chain and our own learnings and the industry know-how is definitely like the biggest part about our moat, or the starting point of our moat. I don't think it's like the only thing, but I think that sourcing plus storyline is something that we definitely want to keep in mind to differentiate from the rest. Obviously, at the same time, we also understand that Alibaba.com is only one of the marketplaces that our users might be sourcing from. So we're also trying to make it more open in the sense that in Accio where you can also search for suppliers and like products even outside of Alibaba.com's ecosystem as well. But I think how that looks like into how to translate into kind of our own product experiences. So far, we have briefly touched upon that industry know-how because we know all of these category best practices. So no matter what kind of categories as we have experience in, you're going to get that that recommendation or that guidance along the way. That can also include negotiation and supplier communication. So for example, because right now through Accio Work, we have our AI auto chat function, meaning that now you can train the agent to conduct or multiple agents to conduct that sourcing task on behalf of you. So instead of you having to stay up late, depending on time zone, asking or answering questions, you have 20 agents, right? Each speaking with the supplier, negotiating. And then when I say negotiation, it's not just about the bulk order price. It can be about the sample cost. It can be about the lead time. It can be about your MOQ. It can be about different material flexibility. So all of these kind of like, how do you approach negotiation? How do you approach establishing credibility as someone new in the space? How do you nurture that relationship with the supplier? All of these longer term things. So it's not just like you find a supplier, you place an order and you're done. So that overall growth journey is something that we see continues as our users' business grow or kind of evolve over time. That's one thing. I think the other thing, again, is kind of that synergy or consistency across platforms where you made a change to your product, because it happens quite often where you are updating your products, maybe because of your learning in the competitive space, sometimes learning from Accio Work, or it can be your suppliers are recommending the latest techniques of the production, like, capabilities that you're incorporating that. So how do you make sure your communication on the production end is reflected to your marketplace? It's reflected to your social media, it's reflected to your community, to your newsletter. So I think that sourcing plus, kind of that type of like experience or that consistency is also where we see, we take pride in as kind of like that holistic experience or evolution for our users as well. And then so that's something that we're definitely taking pride in, keeping it as our mode while expanding on how do we translate that know-how into every aspect of our users or our operators business lifecycle.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to double click on that. So Alibaba itself has cited 1.5 million verified suppliers, more than something like 400 million SKUs behind Accio. These are wild numbers. This is not even including other suppliers, right? Like you just mentioned. How do you maintain that data quality? And actually, how do you ensure there's fairness in terms of like how you actually provide your users the right supplier network or the supplier contact? Because I don't understand how the back end ends. When I'm looking for, say, a hair clip, what comes up? How do I understand what goes behind the interface?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll answer it in two different layers. So I'll separate Alibaba.com or our supply chain network as one layer and then talk about where Accio Work fits in. But starting from the Alibaba.com as our own network, we have established our own very comprehensive system for that verification. For example, for all of our verified suppliers, that verified batch is being verified by a third party where they have submitted their like certificates, all of the requirements and the registry and all of that. That's one example. And the second example is that, for example, for all of those like trade assurances or all of these things that we're constantly evolving to make sure all of these things are available for you to make sure, you can choose, and also including a lot of, so that's kind of like on our own network side that we have our own system. And then where Accio Work comes in, because it's a different name, right? It's not called Alibaba.com. So it offers a few different flavors. The first thing first is that in Accio Work, there isn't any sponsorship or ads in place. Well, in Alibaba.com, yes, there are those different placements, but Accio Work purposely decided not to do that to make sure you are getting recommendations based on the best matches of your requirements. So let's say, depending on where you are, sometimes you might be in an exploration phase. Let's say I'm interested in building, what was the other thing I looked for the other day? It was like wooden bits for like board games. And I was like, I don't even know like where to start. And then Axel can tell you, so here are the 5 key areas you should consider. Let me walk you through how to make each of these decisions first. And then let me match you with the right supplier. So don't rush. Let's take it slow. Or it might be, I know exactly what's the model, what's my location, what's my MOQ, what's my price range, etc., and then match it for me. So what you're gonna see in Accio Work is, let's say you have a list of 5 things, and then for each of these supplier, are they 3 out of 5? Are they 4 out of 5? And what else might be a recommendation? And this can be hard requirements. Let's say it must be this model. It must be, they must have expert experience in certain places. It can also be about preferences. Let's say maybe you already have lots of factories in a certain region, and then you just prefer that this new factory for this new component is in the same region, so it's easier for consolidation for shipping. So it can be a preferences. And those are areas where a regular label, right, or tag doesn't cover as well compared to AI for LLM to process that for you. So that's one area. And then the other area is that, so that's the first thing that Axio baked in, is that no ads, just based on what fits the best, based on your matches. The other thing obviously is kind of having that third triangulation of data. So we do have this ability for you to vet a supplier on Accio Work, which means that what it's going to do is it's not only going to search for in the back end for Alibaba.com, like what kind of certificates they have, but let me go on a custom record. Let me go on social media, double check, do they have a presence? Do they have they attended trade shows? So all of these additional data you don't get from the platform, Axio is pulling in, compare notes to make sure you are making a confident decision on that end. So that's the second thing. And the third layer, again, is that even with all of this fixed data, or sometimes could be outdated, or you just want to verify or triple check it. And that's where that automatic communication comes in, where now let the agent directly speak to the suppliers on behalf of you, ask for photos of certificates, right? Ask for images of the factory if they don't have any. Triple check on all of these areas. So all of these 3 layers are how Accio Work is building a different experience to make sure you are making a more confident decision.
Okay, so why then was it so necessary to build a separate agent on top of Alibaba.com and 168 instead of, just adding a chat interface or conversation interface on top of it? I believe a lot of the Alibaba products right now all have an AI chatbot embedded in their product interface, but why was it so necessary to build a separate Accio?
Yeah, good question. I think a few things. The first is that maybe back to our North Star when it comes to that open ecosystem. I think having a separate brand or even an identity is a must-have to make sure our supply chain is not limited to Alibaba.com, and also our use cases are not just limited to sourcing. So that explains everything that Accio Work is doing by incorporating new supply chain options, partnerships, incorporating new connectors or services or like solutions together. I think that's kind of the biggest thing itself. And I think the other side of the things is that when it comes to branding, to some extent, although we do have lots of existing Alibaba.com users adopting Accio Work for that new value add as well, but Accio Work is really reaching a brand new group of audiences around the world. A lot of them are like net new aspiring entrepreneurs who now realize that opening your business on your own is possible. So I think there's a brand new type of like audiences that we're reaching with its own kind of the AI flavor of like a branding as well. So we're building a community that is also beyond Alibaba.com.
That's interesting. I have a bit of a spicy question for you. Then what's the difference really if I were a solo entrepreneur using Accio versus maybe I just get Claude then? I get co-work.
That's a great question. I think a few thoughts here. The first thing first, the simple answer is that Accio Work is the only agentic platform now that has the official connect to the Alibaba.com. So all the other AI tools, maybe they can search for some of these suppliers by using the browser extension and all of that, but they're not going to get all the backend data about those suppliers. They're not going to be able to directly communicate, or the agents cannot chat directly with them, and also cannot connect the dots all across the board. I think that's the simple way out. But I think also because all of our team's energy is super focused on this field. And I think in this world where everything is nothing, right? So by us putting all of our resources and energy into just supporting e-commerce, small, medium-sized businesses, we are making more progress, more in-depth progresses on just that ecosystem specifically. And I think in that phase, the connectors or the plugin are just one of the areas. The other one is just a general industry best practices. And what I'm referring to is not just kind of like what the platform has learned, but also the people in the ecosystem. We're building a community, we're sharing skills, very like or even sometimes building different agents, and now you can learn from each other as well. So I think it's not just about the data, it's about a community, it's about the best practices as well. So people are learning from each other, all of those solopreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, of how to start something and then grow from there.
So then I want to ask you about something you mentioned, I think, in passing a couple of times, which is like the agents can help you speak to the suppliers. It was quite fascinating. How does that work in the back end? Like are at this point are just like agents talking to agents and then making deals happen, and then you have a product that's purchased for you, and the next thing you know, it's already out there on a website. What does the human need to do still? So tell us about that.
Yeah. So maybe we can walk through a pretty classic source and experience. Let's assume that you kind of already have a pretty good idea about what you're looking for. So you're going to go into Accio. We're going to talk about, let's say maybe this is a category, this is my specs, the color, the material, etc. Give me recommendations, and then it will give you some top recommendations you can select. And then Accio Work, the agent will develop a pretty professional inquiry for you to make sure it's speaking the industry language to set you up for success as someone who's an experienced serious buyer. And then you can say, select these five or the top five and send this inquiry directly to them. So in the back end, it's connected to the Alibaba.com connector. So the agents are sending those information. That's the first thing. But what that's going to turn on is what we call the AI auto chat, meaning for each chat conversation, the agent is actively engaging in conversation during that time. And then what we have seen as the most common workflow, which actually aligns very well, even in the pre-AI era, is that people start broad, they shortlist, and when it comes to the final one or two, they actually go in for the full-on investigation, right? So that's what we're seeing for Accio Work, for our AI auto as well, is that the agent does the best, brings the most value in that early shortlisting phase. So let's say, for example, I have a really, really highly customized product. It's really hard for me to or some really unique needs. It's not enough for me just to go on a website to evaluate that. And I have a list of 5 questions for every single supplier. In the past, I have to ask each of these 5 questions, maybe to 5 suppliers max, right? But then not all of them are going to answer the question in the right order, or maybe some are missing something. So you're the Excel sheet, right? You go into this chat and say, okay, question number 1, number 3, number 4 is done, but not number 2. The other one is only under whatever, right? So the agent, what it's going to do is say, okay, you gave me a list of 5 questions. I will make sure every single supplier respond to each one of them. If they're missing one, I'm going to chase them, and then I'm going to save those answers into a table so you can make apple to apple comparison. And usually halfway, this supplier says they cannot accept this, that supplier says they cannot do that, or they're out of order for something. You ended up with 1 or 2, and then typically now I can jump in to say, okay, now I feel good about it. Auto chat, you can take a pause. Let me take over the communication just to make sure the final collaborations are I feel good about that, and then I can place an order, etc. And in that process, I do want to highlight that obviously AI can automate a lot of things for you, but in many cases, just like in other industries, it's a lot about relationship, right? Unless you're paying for what we call ready to ship, like standardized product. Let's say I'm just buying some balloons for a party or buying some bracelets for an event. Otherwise, for a highly customized product, you're building a relationship. So at the end of the day, it is recommended for you to have some interaction with the suppliers because you might be working with them on your next iteration of new product as well.
Very interesting. So it's really just helping improve the lead quality and then shortening the negotiation time in many sense. And then but the ultimate actual decision making is still like in the hands of the human. That makes a lot of sense. So I want to turn the table around. We talked a lot about how it's helping businesses, right? Helping the vendor, the seller. But the other end of it is the suppliers. And I believe that a lot of suppliers are actually on Accio and also turning on auto chat, whatnot. So what basically support do you provide suppliers and help them in selling their products to the vendor in the between, or like the brand owner?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a version or specific plugins that are meant for the factories and the suppliers who can also choose to be on Accio Work for their side of the sales as well. And I think even pre-Accio world, a lot of the more AI tech savvy factories are already developing their own chatbot for services as well. So I don't think that's new to some extent. But what I think a few of the really key areas that we are seeing success, the first one is actually a little bit more about background research on potential buyers, because a lot of them, maybe they're overseas. They don't have all the awareness or the ability to search across the world about learning about who is this buyer, are they serious, what's the scale, right? All of these things. So we're seeing a lot of our factories or our sellers on the platform using Accio Work to understand their potential buyers. Because a lot of times, again, maybe there are buyers who are not as experienced, but are very serious. That wouldn't come across in their messaging, especially maybe English not their first language either, right? We have users in Europe, in Latin America as well. So, and also in the US. So I think by giving more data to the suppliers to get a better picture about the potential buyers, it also helps them capture opportunities or avoid losing or missing out on opportunity. I think that's a really critical part for sure. And I think the other part is about that general selling optimization as well. It can be, most of the times it will be on the Alibaba.com platform. How do you stand out as a seller by learning about the data, learning about the user behavior as well. So I think these are a few areas that we are seeing a lot of usage from the supplier side.
I see. It makes sense. Something we talked about offline before recording this is, that a lot of the users, whether they're your sellers or, the actual brand owners, is that AI is still relatively new, right? They're not the people in Silicon Valley. They're not working for big tech. And that's quite different from a lot of the other generative tools being sold or marketed to these more so-called sophisticated AI users. Now, how are you helping them, I guess, whether it's upskill or understand or not be so intimidated by AI?
Yeah, great question. I think a few thoughts here. Maybe a few different perspectives when it comes to product development side, on the go-to-market side, on the educational side, etc. I think to start from the product side, I think what we have been really emphasizing or de-emphasizing is a focus, is too much focus on the features themselves. So what we have learned is that when we're packaging them, we're not like, it's almost like sometimes our users, they don't need a toolbox. They just need like an almost built up tool that can run itself. So what our product team has been really focusing on is not just to build the building blocks, but build a framework of those building blocks. So we're not making our users to learn to become a Lego expert right away. So I think from a product end, it's more about how can we take off the burden of the configuration as much as possible. That has always been an emphasis, but even more importantly, as we're getting more newer users in the space, I think that's one thing. The other thing when it comes to just overall marketing side, what we are also exploring now is a lot more when it comes to live events, either it's in person or online, where we're taking things slow. And then in this process, what we are trying to emphasize is more the workflow, the use cases, as opposed to the feature. Like, let me show you how this thing works from what's the input and what's the output. And this is all you need to do is to copy and paste and whatever. And then I can explain to you what happens on the back end, because ultimately what we call the job to be done, right? They're not adopting a nail, right? They're adopting a hole like on the wall, things like that. I think that kind of stays consistent. I think the very last thing in this process from a educational perspective that it's also learning from my perspective is that a lot of times the users are not only learning about AI, but they're learning about just how to launch and run a business. That's almost even more important than a tool. The tool is an enabler to help you achieve the goals in business as well. So what we are trying to do is to resurface the business know-how. It can be sourcing, it can be about product design, it can be about how do you do SEO, or like how do you do like B2B, like pipeline or lead gen. And then let me bake in those automation in the back end. But what you're taking away is how to do this thing, even in the pre-AI era, but now just making it easier to do. So I think that has been more of an emphasis from a go-to-market or like a community building perspective as well, to make sure we're not overwhelming our audiences, because maybe they're already overwhelmed by all the AI tools out there in the market as well. So how can we shorten that and let them get to that aha moment faster and easier?
So how do you plan to monetize Accio then? Are you guys charging subscription? Are you guys going to start plugging in advertisement?
Yeah. So Accio Work is currently on a subscription plan model, both for personal subscription plan and also for business plan as well. And then all of these typically by a monthly plan or an annual plan is primarily based on token usage. So depending on how much work, how many types of things, what's the frequency of the tasks that you anticipate on the platform, and then you're upgrading yourself based on the amount of work that token consumes. So typically that depends again on the volume, on the complexity, and also on different models you choose to activate for each of these tasks. And that kind of aligns with our vision since the beginning. At least starting from Accio, the sourcing engine, to now the Agentic platform as well. So it's mostly focused on usage. We do not currently have a plan, again, because of that kind of like fairness or the quality of results. We're not dealing with like advertisement from suppliers. Most of the things is more about how do we empower our like sellers, like or buyers on our platform, the sellers to the consumers to get their business running using the agentic capability.
Now, throwing it forward, where do you see agentic commerce going? Because it's really interesting. I just interviewed a agentic payment solution company last week as well. And then now obviously talking to you guys about agentic supplying, supply network support. Where does agentic commerce kind of take us? Like in the future, are we just going to be like telling the agents to do this whole transaction, this whole activity loop? Or do you think that human is still needed for a lot of the verification and quality control in between?
Yeah, I think a few thoughts here. I do think that human in the loop is critical. At different stage of a development. So for example, when we talk about agentic or agentic automation, right? We're automating an existing workflow. Yes, there are a lot of best practices, but it really varies, right? So even having your co-developing an automation workflow with the AI tools in the beginning, and that will vary all the time. The more you invest in that co-creation with the agents in the beginning, the better the automation or the workflow will work well for you. And then along the way, what we're also seeing from our users is that they're learning while doing. You're building a plane while you're flying it. So there's always going to be learnings along the way. Just like in coding, there are ways for you to build the agents to do that automation by themselves. But I think the more complex the considerations are, the better impact a human can bring to that loop as well. So that's in the middle part, right? And then also in the end, I think we're still building that trust along the way, like between the human and the agent or the agentic loop as well. So I do think that having the option for an agency, for the human to have that agency is always critical, that I think it needs to stay. But then on the other hand, what I also want to add is that I think the world of agentic commerce can vary quite a bit between B2B and B2C. For example, in the B2C world, there's always that shopping experience. It's not going to get taken away, right? Just going to browsing, that emotional experience is not going to be replaced by AI. While the B2B world is a little bit more calculated, is more, right? But still, you have that relationship part. So I think in both ends, I think there's still human touch in addition to human decision needs to go in. But where I'm the most excited about is that because our target audience or our target users sits literally in between. They're in this loop for B2B agentic commerce, and also they're in this loop of B2C agentic commerce. So what I'm excited to see is how these two worlds are merging, or our core audiences sit in this overlap in between. And then I'm excited to see more of that synergy of what works in the B2C agentic commerce world can get better integrated with the B2B world as well. Because again, like our sellers or our buyers are sit in between the factories, right? And them as a brand owner, and then the consumers as well. So I think this is where I think the next iteration of innovation, or maybe redefine like the new definition of workflows of tools that might happen as well.
Super fascinating. Because I think when I've been speaking to people who are working in the agentic commerce space, it's often so very compartmentalized, like what you said, like, there's the B2C world, but there's B2B world. And these two worlds don't really, collide at all, because whoever's talking to factory is not really telling what's happening to the consumer. And there's no really feedback. Factories don't even know where the product's going and how it's being branded. But now there's that kind of ecosystem, like communication, or the worlds colliding between on Accio. It's very interesting. What do you think the world's still getting wrong about agentic commerce? Because I think there's still some people who are very reluctant or resistant towards agentic commerce or the idea of it. what do you think is people are having misunderstanding about it?
Yeah, I think one thing that we briefly already touched upon is whether agentic commerce is taking away the agency of human. So I think that's the part that causes the most concern or hesitance is that, is the agent going to replace me? But I think a lot of these judgment calls, even that branding, right? That personal story about you being as an operator, you having that guidance on the branding, on the story, all of that, it's not going to go away. But also, it's not going to go away, but it's also critical for you to inform where the agent should go. I think that's one thing. But the other thing that I feel like maybe where I think it's also like a lot of times when, just as you said, when people think about commerce, they're thinking it still tend to go more siloed or go into just on specific steps. So I think it's still that orchestration layer when things start to get connected and start to flow together. So it's not just about how well each of the step is done well, but how well all of these steps are connected. And then that's also where that human in the loop, where your agency is bringing that flow together. So I think that's an overall area where I think it's people might be evaluating the wrong thing as opposed to they're making the wrong judgment call about one specific thing.
Thank you. And then my last question for you is a question I ask every single guest that comes on. As the podcast name is called Different Understanding, what is one differentiated view you hold or something you think that's very non-consensus?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that really stood out to me is that not every problem needs AI to be solved, or AI is not a solution for everything. And I think that has implications both on the development side and also on the user side. So on the development side, what we mean is that there are solutions or there are things that we can build that is more efficient or more accurate even without AI. So we should not shy away from that. And that will impact how people build products. But on the other hand, even for the users, that also means that skills in AI is important, but that's not enough, or that's not the only thing that I will focus on in this era, AI era phase. Instead, I will still spend time in building your domain knowledge as well, because without that, you're not going to be able to learn how to use AI the best, because maybe sometimes AI cannot solve all the problems as well. So I think having a balanced view about where AI sits in the product or in your tool stack is something that will allow you to get the best out of all the AI tools available and drive results for yourself.
I love that. It's like keeping the human side of things in check. But I think it's only non-consensus of where you sit because you sit in the Bay Area. Only people in the Bay Area believe AI is taking over the world right now. But thank you so much for your time with Ziwei. Really appreciated your insights and your very, very deep understanding of the agentic commerce world.
Yeah, thank you. I had fun. Appreciate it.